All right. Hello again, Avengers, and welcome. Another exciting daily vlog. This is Daily Vlog 2025, number 195, and today we're here to answer the question, what is normal? I need a drink, which is normal. Humans drink water. It's not normal that I drink exclusively bottled water, but that's a whole nother thing with my anxiety. So, and living in a place where I don't think it's a problem anymore, but very near where I live. I don't know if it was ever a problem here. They had an issue with the all the city water having cryptosporidium in it, which is real bad. So, yeah, I don't trust tap water anymore. Haven't for years. All right. Quick health update. I tried eating something. Actually, all I did was I have these Ensure meal shake thingies because I can't eat. I can't keep enough calories in because my brain won't let me eat. So I use these Ensure shake things because in addition to having calories, they also have things like protein and vitamins and other stuff like that. They're good if you can't eat. And I haven't been able to drink any of them for months since all the other health stuff kind of skyrocketed like 2 months ago. So I'm like, I'm still eating like 600 to 800 calories a day. It's bad. So I tried having one of those, and stomach did not like it, and I got massively sick from a single, like, meal replacement shake. And not like diet or anything. Again, the entire purpose of this is to give you all the stuff you can't get when you can't eat. So I was sick last night. I'm doing better. Probably not going to be drinking another one of those for a while. All right, let's talk about normal. So I was watching the YouTubes, as you do, and so there's this content creator whom shall remain nameless, because the purpose of this is not to critique their particular video, but they're an anti-MLM content creator that I found just because I am very anti-MLM, as are most people that understand how business works. If anyone's wondering what MLM stands for multi-level marketing, things like Avon and other stuff like that, where somebody sells you things and then they have someone that got them into the business, and then there was someone above them that got that person into the business. It's a type of business structure that is highly exploitative, ends up ruining a lot of people's lives because the people at the very bottom lose money. In these jobs, like how they're created, they just don't make any money. The only people that actually make money are way up, and it requires you exploiting people in order to do that, in my opinion, legally. So, I watch her content for the anti-MLM stuff because it's interesting and I really enjoy it. But she does other things as well, including this thing where she talks about influencers doing weird shit. Which is, again, something that's fun. Every so often, I like to see the tea spilled. She made a video recently about specifically influencer, like YouTubers that did like a complete 180 on their content. And the first one that she talked about is a dude that I don't remember their channel name, but effectively they would make daily vlogs significantly better than anything you've seen on this channel. Where effectively what they would do is they would film their day as they worked a kind of regular 9 to 5 job. And recently they decided to quit their 9 to 5 job to go into full-time content creation because they have over 1 million followers. and things. And again, they've been, according to the video where they declared that they were quitting, they had made 700 plus daily vlogs. And these are not like my daily vlogs where I just turn a camera on and I talk. Sometimes I do some research. These are highly edited, highly planned, because they have to literally stop what they're doing to set up a camera to film bits of their day while still working their full-time 9-to-5 job at a Fortune 500 company. And it became really, really popular. And one of the reasons it was so popular is they, with how YouTube works in general, the people that get really big tend to be the people that have the most unapproachable lifestyle. What I mean by that is people like to kind of live vicariously through celebrities and TV shows and things like that. It's why things like Friends was so incredibly popular. They lived in New York City, one of the most expensive places to live on the planet. Doesn't quite reach the realms of California, specifically LA and San Francisco, but it is one of the higher cost living places in one of the most expensive countries to live in the world. And you had all of these friends who did everything from being a working actor, which, just FYI, working actors don't actually make money. Like, you get enough to kind of fund your next headshot or your next investment. But until you are getting regular roles, you're really not living that particularly well. You're definitely not living in the apartments that these people lived in. And things like Rachel worked as a bad waitress in a coffee shop. Like, that's minimum wage work. You can't afford to live in those places and do the things that these people do on the salaries that they had. I mean, what was her name? Courtney Cox's character was a private chef, so that is well above minimum wage. I can't remember what Phoebe did. Chandler worked the corporate grind. Ross was something involving a museum, I think. But everyone that was kind of watching this show were living vicariously through them, because these people were living a life that is unobtainable to 90% of the population. They all had roommates that they absolutely adored. They all had jobs that looked fun and zany and things like that. And that's just not how the real world works. And so the vast majority of YouTube kind of follows that example. The people that are the most popular are people that are doing things that are technically unobtainable. I mean, look at the Paul brothers. All the nonsense that they do, 99.9999999% repeating people in the world. If they were to try like 1,000th of the things that the Paul brothers have done, they would be in jail for some of them. Allegedly, my opinion, legalese. And would be would be unhireable because people would hate them so much. But that's the thing that people see. It's actually something that that I learned in marketing classes, was the idea that an incredibly effective marketing strategy is to be aspirational, to sell things with the idea of, if you get this, it will allow you to live this life that you've always wanted. It is one of the 7 standard marketing techniques, is that, hey, if you do this, you will be able to be like these people, the aspirations. So going back to this content creator, they weren't doing this thing that was completely unobtainable in a lot of people's minds. This was working a regular 9 to 5. And because it was a regular 9 to 5, I was like, oh, they're so down to earth and they're so normal. And then they quit to become a full-time influencer, and now they're still doing their vlogs, but they're doing things like, oh, this is me walking my dog because now I have the time to do that on a regular basis, or this is me getting ready to do my promo posts, or this is me, like the stuff that regular influencers do, and their audience is kind of split. A large portion of them is mad. It's like, it's not fair. You said that doing a 9 to 5 job could be fulfilling, and now you're not. And that means that you lied to us. No, that's not it. They were given an offer to make significantly more money for not less stress, but a different kind of stress. And most people, when given that option, will do that. That's actually not the point of this video either. The YouTuber that was talking about this was talking about how this person was doing the job that the majority of people in the country do, and they were making it look normal. So that's where their audience came from, was the majority of the people in this country that work that exact same job. And that is 100% false. Office jobs are not a majority of jobs in the U.S. They're not even a plurality. If you're unfamiliar with the terms, the actual definitions of them from a statistical aspect, a majority is more than half, more than 50%. So 51% or higher. That's what a majority is when you're looking at a data set. A plurality is less than 50%, but it is the highest subcategory in there. So, for example, if I was to do a survey of people and find out whether they like red, white, or blue, of those three colors, which one is their favorite, and 57% said red was their favorite, that would be, I'd be able to truthfully say a majority of those I surveyed said they preferred red. However, if that same thing, but I got like 10% to 20% and 30%, to use really easy numbers. All right, let's do this. I have to do math. 30%, 30%, and 40%. There we go. That makes 100. If I got 30%, 30%, and 40%, none of them are the majority. However, the one that got 40% would be called the plurality. They are the largest number that's under 50%, since there is no majority. Office workers are not a plurality. They are not a majority. The vast majority of workers in this country do not ever see the inside of an office as part of their daily routine. The statistics I've been able to find is roughly around 12%-ish of the population works in some sort of office setting. But even those numbers are a little bit misleading, because they don't really define what they mean by that. Like, they list like administrative assistants and customer service all under this lump sum of office work. Well, some customer service is exactly that. You're in a cubicle, you're at a desk answering phones. But another version of customer service is the person that works at the concierge desk in a hotel, or the person that works at the returns desk in a store. If they're lumping all of those into quote-unquote office work, then it's not really real, to be perfectly honest. They also separate out management as its own category, which is roughly, I want to say it's 6% of the U.S. workforce works in some sort of management position. And that, again, is this broad category of everything from, like, I was technically in management because I was a key carrier in a store. We had a manager's office. I was very rarely, if ever, in the manager's office. And the manager's office doesn't work like a cubicle or something like that. It was just a room with the computer that we used to do some of our management duties, like create the schedule. But it's not an office job. So the idea that the average American worker is doing a quote unquote 9 to 5 isn't true. It was true for a decent portion of the modern era. When you get into like the 19th century, probably going all the way up to like the 60s, 70s, maybe into the 80s, the 9 to 5 was the standard job. Definitely a plurality of people that were working these 9 to 5 jobs. I don't think it was ever a majority because the service industry in and of itself requires a lot of people for it to be able to function. But again, for a long time, the amount of choice in the service industry was very, very, very low. So despite the fact that the service industry, like restaurants and stores and other things like that, despite the fact that them needing a lot of workers, most people were going to the same, 3 or 4 different restaurants or, 2 or 3 different stores to get everything that they needed. And so there was a pretty decent amount of time where the 9 to 5 was the quote unquote normal duty job. It hasn't been that way for decades. The service industry in general, and again, service industry is such a broad term that some people in the service industry do work a 9 to 5 job. But the majority of people in the service industry don't work a 9 to 5. They work retail and food service and hospitality, which is things like hotels and other things like that, cleaning services, a large amount of things like that. The idea of the 9 to 5 job being the normal has not been the normal for decades. It is somewhat aspirational to a lot of people because people that have never worked a 9 to 5 job assume that the 9 to 5 job fixes all the problems that they have with their job. Like, really good example. I worked in retail for over a decade. The majority of that time I was working in retail management, which meant that in addition to working all the jobs that your standard retail employee did, I also got yelled at for other things and got to do things like interviewing and creating schedules and stuff like that. But I still did things like stocking shelves, unloading trucks, doing direct sales with customers, cleaning up puke and shit. Like, the idea of the manager doesn't do anything doesn't exist. That's there are managers that are absolutely lazy and worthless. They're very, very rare because stores can't exist on the with anybody not pulling their weight, because most stores are vastly understaffed. So having one person's not pulling their weight, the entire store collapses. So for a while I thought, damn, if I could just get a 9 to 5, it'd be so nice, because things like having weekends off. I never had a weekend off unless I literally was on vacation. And in general, the only time I ever took vacation was when I was effectively forced to. I was basically told, listen, you have accrued the maximum number of vacation days you are allowed to have. If you do not take a vacation, all of the paid time off that you should be earning goes directly in the garbage. So go take a week off. That was the only time I ever had a quote unquote weekend off. Retail workers and service industry workers in general do not get weekends off. Holidays, quote unquote paid holidays, don't exist in the service industry. In the service industry, I worked every Black Friday. I worked, I think, every Christmas Eve for 10 years, or a little over that. Every Christmas Eve. I absolutely refused to work on Thanksgiving. And had I stayed in a little bit long, if I'd stayed at one of the jobs I was at for another holiday season, I probably would have been written up or fired over it, because everyone had to be able to work Thanksgiving Day. Because Black Friday started 8 p.m. Thanksgiving Day. It was monumentally stupid. I'm glad they stopped doing that. I worked on Easter. I worked on Arbor Day and Memorial Day and every other quote-unquote paid holiday that has ever existed. I have worked on it except for Christmas. New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. Paid holidays don't exist in the service industry. And I know quite a few people that worked Christmas and Thanksgiving and all the other, holidays that I might have gotten off for one reason or in another. Everybody works every day. There's not a single day where everything in the world is closed so that people can just, enjoy their holiday. Does it exist? Gas stations are a fantastic example. They're open all the time. Somebody has to work that. So a lot of people assume, well, if I could just have a 9 to 5, that would fix anything. I would get holidays off. I would get weekends off. I would get nights off because I only have to work from 9 to 5. That's not how a 9 to 5 works, unfortunately. First of all, 9 to 5 is not a 9 to 5 because unlike a lot of retail jobs where you kind of have your choice of where you work and you generally are able to get a retail job or a service industry in general job within like maybe 10 to 15 minutes of where you live. Like a long commute for a retail job might be like 30 minutes. Office jobs don't work like that. Most offices are located in big cities and things like that, which tend to be expensive to live in. And so commutes are a thing. So your 9 to 5 involves you waking up at 6 in the morning to get ready, leaving your house by 7 o'clock, 7:30 to get on a bus or to get on a train. If you're really lucky, you can ride a train to work because trains are lovely, folks. Buses, less so, but they still get a much worse rep than they should. Well, why don't you just drive in? Because gas costs money. Parking spaces cost money. Lots of different things. And so, and your 9 to 5 job in general is not going to be paying super well. A lot of them can start at like 30 grand a year, which is above poverty wages, but just. Once you're established, you might get to the quote-unquote national average in the U.S., which is somewhere in the neighborhood of, I want to say now it's moved up into the $50,000 range. And then you stay there for 30 years. Pay raises do happen, but they're not massive. Like the idea of you working a 9 to 5 and going from like the low income bracket to middle income bracket is very possible. But moving from like low mid to medium mid or high mid isn't really going to happen. You're still going to stay in your sub bracket, and the higher your pay is, the less you're going to get raises, the less you're going to get opportunities for more things. In addition to that, so we're already talking about how the 9 to 5 doesn't start at 9. A lot of times it starts very, very early. I knew some 9 to 5 people that started their day at 5 in the morning. Then, 5 o'clock, you get to clock out and go. No. Depending on how your 9 to 5 is structured, if you're a salaried employee, you may be required to stay after work somewhat regularly. It might be written into your contract, and you don't get any extra money for that. Again, depending on the type of work that you're doing. If you're working in an office space, like a cubicle or something like that, overtime exemptions were written specifically for people like you. And that's what people think of when they think of the 9 to 5, is working in a cubicle. So you're probably not going to leave work at 5. And if you do leave at 5 o'clock on the dot every single day, you will eventually have a meeting with a middle manager where they will talk about your work effort or your motivation. They might phrase it as, well, we need to talk about your future with the company because doing the bare minimum doesn't fly really well. You need to be fairly well invested in the company to get away with doing the bare minimum because they can always get some other retail worker who thinks the 9 to 5 is the perfect job to fill your spot. So you're not, the 9 to 5 doesn't end at 5. You're probably getting out of work 5:30, maybe 6 o'clock. On bad days, you might be there till 7. Then you have your commute home, which again is probably going to be a minimum of half an hour, maybe hour, hour and a half. I knew people who had hour and a half long commutes to work. For a little while, I had working in retail because I switched stores to get away from a moron of a boss. I had, I think, an hour commute, and I drove myself. Like, I didn't use public transportation because getting from where I was to the store that I was working at, there was no bus route. There was no, like, I would have had to go through like 3 or 4 different city bus systems to get there. And it probably would have taken me like 2.5 hours there and back. And again, retail, you don't work starting at 9 in the morning and ending at 5. Like, my scheduled shifts for one of the stores, I started at, I think it was 6 in the morning, and we opened at 9. And then I left somewhere in the neighborhood between 2 and 7 at night. So 2 p.m. to 7 p.m. because I was a manager. I didn't really get to choose when I left, depending on when I could actually excoriate myself from the store. And that was an opening shift. Normally, I worked closing shifts, which means I would get to the store anywhere between like noon and 4, and I wouldn't leave until between 3 and 5 in the morning. And then again, I had, depending on when it was, I had half an hour to an hour commute. So the 9 to 5 isn't what people think it is, and it's also not the norm. The norm is working in the service industry, to be perfectly honest. And the service industry is such a broad term. Like, working in a hotel is very, very different than working in a restaurant. And working in a restaurant is very, very different than working in a retail store. And working in a retail store is very, very different than working in a call center. All of those things are service industry. All of them are soul crushing. All of them are very, very physically demanding. Like, a lot of people don't realize just how much endurance it takes to be, like, the MVPs as far as endurance is concerned are wait staff, your restaurant servers and the things like that, because they are constantly moving. They very rarely get a chance to sit down. They are constantly bringing massive amounts of heavy plates full of lots of food, especially in the U.S. where our portion size is nonsense. Working in a restaurant is incredibly physically demanding, and I think a lot of people don't quite realize that. And in addition to the fact that it is an endurance test, thank you, phone. It's also a mental endurance test. Servers get shit on, sometimes quite literally, all day. You have customers that treat them like absolute peasants and peons that deserve to be stepped on. You have bad managers that will treat them as indentured servants or slaves. Or the real fun ones are the ones that treat their employees like they're their own personal playthings, and actually get enjoyment out of inflicting suffering on them. Those people exist. They're horrible to work for. Now, when we go to retail, I remember I was working for a video rental chain. And this was back in 20 something, well, after 2010. So everyone going, oh my God, he's so old. No, this particular video rental chain didn't die until after COVID. And they were printing money, guys. Like, I cannot tell you, if it wasn't for the fact that this company was run by a bunch of unethical assholes, it would still be printing money today. Like, they just, it was insane how much money these companies made. But they did things like, ignored labor laws and got sued and fined repeatedly for violating labor laws. Intentionally, it was found over and over and over again. So yeah, they don't exist anymore. But I was a manager. I got into this particular business as a manager. And I was being trained to be a manager, and then as soon as I was done with my training, I was going to get my own store, which is something I'd always wanted. I'd always wanted to run my own store. I was tired of dealing with managers that didn't know their ass from a hole in the ground, and I was really, really good at running stores. So I would work, because the video rental place, it wouldn't open until 10. So I would get to work at like 9:30, which for me, an opening shift, getting to work at 9:30 is nonsense. Retail starts at 6. Like, it's just how it works. And so I really, really liked it, but we also stayed open until midnight. Meaning I generally didn't leave until about 1 in the morning. But I was actually working in the city that I was living in, so it was like a 5-minute commute. It was wonderful. But there were no chairs in the entire building. And so I would work from like 9:30 in the morning until around 4 or 5, maybe 6 in the afternoon, evening, on my feet 100% of the time. I didn't get breaks. I didn't get it. Like, it was just 9 to 10 hours of being on my feet and walking around and smiling at people and making benign conversation and cleaning shit and doing inventory and moving shelves. And there was a lot to do to keep a damn store like that running. And it wasn't that big a store. Like, that entire movie store could have fit in the printer department for the office supply store that I used to work at. But I remember actually going to my doctor and going, listen, I understand that an 8-hour, shift really isn't that bad. And he said, wait a minute, you don't sit down for 8 hours? I said, yeah. But a lot of people say, no, that's very, very bad. You are destroying your joints. Yes, people do it, but it's not healthy. And the fact that you're in constant pain and have to take all these painkillers to get through the day is normal. Your body's not designed to do this. So yeah, I mean, like, working retail, you're on your feet a lot. You're lifting a lot of heavy things. Like, I used to have to lift like 50 to 100-pound printers. Depending on the store that I was in, I would have to put them into top stock, is what we called it, which was basically like on top of the aisles. So you would have to take this massive printer and get on a ladder and go all the way up to where you were on the shelf that was like 15 to 20 feet in the air, and then hope you didn't fall, because workers' comp is a bitch. That, if we want to talk about what's quote-unquote normal, that is what is normal, is people that are working weird hours, people that are working somewhere in the service industry, people that don't get holidays off, that don't get weekends off, that don't get nights off. That is the quote-unquote normal when we actually look at the total number of people that are working in various jobs. So the idea of, oh, well, he was, this content creator was making normal jobs look fulfilling. No. Like, they specifically worked at a Fortune 500 company. You want to know what Fortune 500? It's the 500 most valuable companies in the world based on this Fortune ranking. Guess how many companies are Fortune 500 companies? 500. There are only 500 Fortune 500 companies in the world. So the idea that that is the norm, working for a Fortune 500 company is not normal. You are in a tiny, tiny subset. The Small Business Administration actually defines on a federal level what a small business is. And by their definition, a small business is anything with fewer than 100 employees. Guess what percentage of businesses in the U.S. are classified as small businesses according to the Small Business Association? It is 99.9% of businesses are small businesses. So the likelihood of you working a quote unquote office job for a business that has less than 100 employees is relatively low. It's just not something like you can have things like doctor's offices. You might consider, like, if you're a receptionist at a doctor's office, a lot of, like, if you're a private practice, yeah, you might only have a couple dozen employees. But even something as small as like a couple doctors getting together to open up their own practice, you're not going to have one receptionist. You're probably going to have between 4 and 8 receptionists, depending on how busy and how many actual doctors you have. Then you have your nursing staff, which could be, again, depending on how many doctors you have, you might only have like 2 or 3 nurses. You might have a dozen nurses. Again, it depends entirely on how much clientele you're working through this. Then you have things like janitorial, which might be your employees. It might be an independent contractor. But even a small business like that, we're very rapidly getting to over 50 employees to have this little small business. The reason that I chose that is because it's theoretically possible to have a receptionist or something in a small business where that's all you do is you sit at a desk, you clock in at 9 and leave at 5, or you do the 9 to 5 thing. Law firms are another one where you might be able to work a quote unquote 9 to 5, but it's just really not all that common. And the idea, like, again, this particular YouTuber got yelled at not only by their audience, but by this particular YouTuber who is a full-time content creator and I don't believe has ever worked a 9 to 5 job. And they specifically stated, it was grounding for me because I felt like, that was normal. It's not normal. And you didn't see their 9 to 5 job. You saw tiny little snapshots of the nice parts of their 9 to 5 job. You never had to sit through the hour-long meeting that should have been an email, simply because one of the middle managers likes the sound of their own voice. You never saw getting 47 emails that all had to be answered immediately. You never saw the dressing down meeting they had with their direct manager where they got blamed for all the problems of their entire department. You never saw the layoff announcements where, good example, my dad worked a 9 to 5 for a decent part of my life. And one of the first businesses in Wisconsin that he worked for, I don't believe exists anymore. But he came into work one day and there was a dude standing at the door to the building. And every single person that would come in, they would be told to either go to the left or go to the right. And you went into these 2 different meeting rooms. And after my dad had been standing in there for a while, wondering what's going on because he needed to get to his desk to do his job. If I remember correctly, he was a database engineer at that point. After he'd been there for like 20 minutes to a half an hour, one of the higher ups came in and said, "Well, congratulations, all of you still have a job." Everyone that was told to go the other direction had just been laid off. So I remember reading about recently, I think it was Amazon or somebody that did mass layoffs. That's effectively how they did them. Was they just had someone at the door and they would go, "Your name, go left. Your name, go right." And then after everybody was in the room, they said, "By the way, you're all gone. Pack up your stuff and leave." That's not a new thing. This happened in the late 90s, yeah, it would have had to have been the late 90s. So like that's not a new thing. There's lots of other ways that layoffs happen. It used to be you would get what was called a pink slip, which in the racing world, pink slips are the deed to your car. But in the business world, pink slip meant you were laid off. And so you would go to your office mailbox and you would take out the inner office mail that would be sent to you, because that's a thing. And you would open it up and there'd be this little slip that was pink that would say, "Hey, this is your final paycheck," or "You are officially terminated as of blah, blah." And everyone could see it. Like, it wasn't like you were going to, like, this was being sent to your home. No, this was in the office mailroom that everybody had access to, that people would have conversations as they're picking up their various stuff. Everyone could see when people got laid off. It was an incredibly stressful time because layoffs were rarely just, "Okay, we're done. Everyone got fired in one day and that's it." Nope, layoffs happen in shifts. Depending on how large the layoff is, it can take months to get through all of them. Again, my dad made it through two of those things at that particular business, and then he got the wrong direction on the third one. And that happened over, I think it was like 6 or 9 months, that the company had to continue laying off people, so they did it in these waves, which is, again, extremely common. So no, the 9 to 5 that this person was presenting wasn't real. It was this aspirational thing that people wanted to be real, and they kind of lived vicariously through these videos of, "Oh, that's what a 9 to 5 would be. It's so nice and it's so relaxing, and you can go home and, you know, do the things that you like." That's not how a 9 to 5 works. A lot of people that work 9 to 5s bring their work home with them. A lot of people that work 9 to 5s have to take business calls during dinner, because if they don't, they'll be fired. The myth of the 9 to 5 has always been a myth. It might have been true in like the 20s for a few years. That's about it. The modern 9 to 5, first of all, is relatively rare, because of so much, especially during the Biden administration. I don't think there was a single month where we actually got full-time job increases. We lost full-time jobs and gained significantly more part-time jobs. So part-time jobs have been growing exponentially over the past 4 years. And that doesn't exclusively have to do with who our president was. The world was going crazy. If you guys were not aware of the past 4 to 5 years, the world kind of went nuts. Yeah, so even the quote unquote 9 to 5s are not normal, because a lot of people that are working quote unquote 9 to 5s are working part-time 9 to 5s, which means they might be working like 3 out of 5 days a week, which would be a good thing because then you can get another job. Or they might be working half days where they're only working 9 to 1 or something like that. And that becomes very, very difficult, because in addition to the fact that you still have your commutes and all those things that are going to cost you the same, whether you work from 9 to 1 or 9 to 5 or 9 to 9. But it also doesn't pay enough for you to make a living off of that. So you have to find an additional job, which sometimes means going from your 9 to 5, that's only 9 to 1, directly to your server job or your janitor job or whatever other service industry job that works, because service industry jobs do exist when your 9 to 5 job is over. Whereas 9 to 5 jobs only exist between the hours of 9 to 5. So anyway, yeah, like I said, I watched this video, and the longer I watched it, the more I just got annoyed, because a lot of the people that were having issues with this particular creator, and that wasn't the whole video. There was other creators that they were talking about too. But this first one, it annoyed me so much, because like, well, people like took solace in the fact that your 9 to 5 job can be fulfilling. Technically, a 9 to 5 job can be fulfilling, but it's not likely. They are very, very hard. Things like feeling trapped in your job because you make just enough that if you switch to another company, you would have to take a slight pay cut for the possibility of making more money later on. And because of the life that you live, you can't afford 6 months to a year making $5,000 a year less. You literally would have to move, because you wouldn't be able to afford your mortgage or your rent or whatever it is. Or every time when the lease renewal comes up, you're dreading how much they're going to increase your rent, because you're probably not going to get a raise big enough to cover that rent. Those are all things that happen in 9 to 5s. Or here's the really fun one: working in a cubicle and feeling like you are trapped in a tiny little box, surrounded by other people that are trapped in a tiny little box, and no one has any control over anything. You are completely helpless. You are a complete slave to whatever your job is, and whatever they tell you to do, you have to do it, because you can't afford to get another job. That is a very common thought process when you work the quote-unquote 9 to 5. Interested to hear from you guys. First of all, do I have any 9 to 5 workers in the audience? Because again, I have not personally had the joy of working a 9 to 5, but my degree, the reason I got my degree was so I could get a 9 to 5 job. Not because I thought 9 to 5 was this perfect, utopia. Again, my dad worked the 9 to 5. He talked about it often. I know a few of the pitfalls. But because it wasn't retail, and I never want to set foot as an employee into a retail store for the rest of my life. It is that bad, folks. So yeah, like I said, any 9 to 5ers out there, do you have any fun stories of the real parts of working a 9 to 5 that maybe I didn't touch on? Or do you want to reinforce oh no, dude, that was totally right? Or did I get anything completely wrong as well? Again, I haven't personally worked a 9 to 5. I just know quite a few people who have, and I did a lot of research into what working a marketing 9 to 5 job would entail, because that's the career that I was planning on getting before I became disabled. Let me know in the comments down below. And for anyone that works in any other field, are there misconceptions about your chosen job field that you would love to clear up? Again, so many people, there are so many misconceptions about how retail, specifically retail management, works that just annoyed the hell out of me. They just weren't true. Or again, the service industry, like restaurants. Oh my God. The number of myths about being a server is nonsense. People have no idea what it's like to be a server if you've never worked it. And there's so many people like, God, your job is just so easy. Nope, in no way, shape, or form. It's one of the hardest jobs in the world to work. It really, really is. So like I said, if you work a 9 to 5, am I close? Am I super far off? And is there anything I missed? Put it down there. And for those of you that don't work 9 to 5s, again, the majority of the world, are there any misconceptions about your chosen career field that you would love to clear up? Put those in the comments down below as well. Anyway, it's going to be all for me today. I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.